Hi teachers! I'm so excited to dig into Unit 2. I can't believe all the work our scholars have done so far in the first unit, and I'm really excited to get into Unit 2 with you and talk about the ways that we can best support our scholars. So let's get started. So we're going to begin this unit with talking about sequencing, and this helps our scholars understand that stories have an order, and that the order helps us as we're thinking about what the author is trying to tell us. The sequencing is really helpful for scholars when they are reading to understand the plot, and that's what we're going to go move into in just a few minutes. But this is a great way to help our scholars. We use the vocabulary first, next, then last as we're talking about sequencing. So scholars should be able to say, like, first, the character did this, second, this happened, and so forth until they get to the end of the story. This is also a great connection that you can make across content areas when you're talking about writing. You can reference that in reading. Our books have a sequence and an order, and then just like in reading, our stories that we write in writing need to have a sequence and an order, so our stories make sense to the reader who will be reading our stories. When scholars sequence, they need to make sure that they're only including those really important events, those key events, and again, we'll be talking some more about that in a few minutes, but when they're sequencing, they need to make sure that they're not just saying what's on the first page, second page, third page, fourth page, but actually thinking about the key events that were really important to the story. So this process, like I said, will lead into plot or the big idea. So that's what we're going to talk about now. So as we move into plot, we talk about that scholars can use their sequencing to help understand the plot or find the plot or the big idea or main idea. This is a really, really important topic in reading because as adults and as college students, our scholars will be expected to understand the plot. And when we read as adults, we don't read to use our schema to make predictions. We read to understand the plot of the story, what the author is really trying to tell us. So this is a really important moment for our scholars, and something that we need to make sure that we're really hitting hard with, so that our scholars will be really successful readers and hopefully enjoy reading even more, both as older scholars in college, but also as adults. So then we're going to move into details. So last week I talked about details and the nitty-gritty details that our stories need to have. And so we talk about how details support the main idea or the plot or the big idea. There's lots of different vocabulary for that. So I always talk about how details support the main idea, and we talk about how legs on a table support the table, and so those details are the legs, and the main idea or the big idea is the tabletop. So that's kind of a connection you guys can make with your scholars to help them understand main idea and details. I also talk about how details should match or support that main idea. So if my detail that I'm giving does not kind of fit like a puzzle piece with my main idea, it's not a detail that I need to be sharing. And then we talk about how we can use some of our senses to help us understand the details. So what is the character looking like? Like my eyes, I can see the book and see the character and tell what the character looks like. I can use my feeling or our feelings in our heart. How is the character feeling in the story? And then what is the character saying? What do we hear in the story? Those often are great details that will usually support the main idea or big idea. So those are kind of some ways we can support our scholars with details. And then as we move on, we have a visual here of kind of big picture what the unit will look like. We have sequencing, key events, main idea, and details. So sequencing and key events kind of go together. Those are the key events are the ones that we are going to sequence in our story as we retell our story, and then that will help us with the main idea, big idea, plot, thinking about what was the story mostly about, what was the author trying to tell the reader, and then last we talk about details and how those details can help support the big idea or main idea. So here's just kind of a breakdown of the unit. I'm a very visual person, so this always helps me when I'm thinking big idea about the unit. What is kind of the order of our events as we sequence our unit. And then let's move into misconceptions. Some of the misconceptions are sequencing. For sequencing, thinking that the beginning or the middle or the end are just the first or second or third page. We need to talk about how the book will have lots of pages, so that doesn't make sense. We need to think about how the first page and the second page might be what's happening at the beginning of the story, and maybe just confusing the vocabulary of beginning and end, or first, next, then last. That can sometimes trip up our scholars when they're retelling the story. So just as you're modeling for them, making sure you use those vocabulary words, and then again, just confusing based on order of vocabulary words. For key events, scholars might try and tell you the whole story instead of the actual key important events. So making sure that when scholars are telling you those key events, that they're just picking out those really important moments in the book. That might change the plot, or affect the plot. And then scholars might just forget parts of the story. So just making sure that when scholars are retelling you those key events, that if they skip a big chunk, to have them go back to the story and kind of look at it to see if it can help them jog their memory. I always tell scholars to go back to this book if you forget something. That can always help you. And then lastly, with details, also scholars think the whole story is a detail. So they're listing you a ton of different things. And again, I just tell my scholars, remember, it has to support that main idea. So if you're telling me a detail and you can tell me the main idea and those don't really fit together, that's not really one of those important details that would be really helpful for us as readers. Here are some resources that I use. I usually cut a half page of the hand, and I will put that, actually laminate it and put it in their book bag. So when they're reading independently or I'm coming around talking with them, it's a quick reference for me to see if they know the main idea of their story and any of those details. The fingers are the details, those question words that help us think about the details of the story. That's also a song that we sing. It's called the Main Idea Song. I've put it on my resources in Blackboard. If you would like to see it scripted, it's to I Got the Whole World in My Hand. Or I can sing it to you at Collab Day. But I like to keep that in their book bags as a way for them to work on the main idea and details. And then you can either have them at the end, share their hand with a partner, or share it with you when you come around to confer with scholars. Another option is the umbrella. That's just kind of a different format depending on what you like. The world is your oyster. Just decide which one you would like. Like I said, I just cut it in a little half sheet, print it 2 to a page, cut it, laminate, stick it in their book bag, and it's really helpful for my scholars when they're thinking about that main idea and details of their story. And lastly, if you would have any questions or need any kind of support, please don't hesitate to reach out. I have my email listed. I'd be happy to help you, whether it's with station ideas or if you just have any kind of questions about misconceptions or ways I teach certain things. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help in any way. We will be having office hours on September 18th at 4:30. We'll send out a calendar invite with the agenda. We will be talking about phonics this office hour and collaborating with 1 and 2, first and second. I really hope you can come. It will be really helpful so we can talk about ways that we can support our scholars in phonics. As we know, phonics is the beginning of reading and that foundation of reading. So please come. I hope you can. And then we also have a CA. Yay, CA1 this unit. Please go back and refresh yourself with the CA. If you took it already, awesome. Maybe grab it and kind of just go back and make sure that you've touched on everything that your scholars will be tested on in October. If you haven't taken the test, I would encourage you to print out the test and take it like a scholar. So you can just make sure if there's anything you need to touch on with your scholars, maybe in small group or a morning meeting. Those are great ways to spiral in some of those CA questions and just kind of make sure that you're supporting your scholars so that they're successful. Like I said, I hope that you guys have a great unit 2. All of our work will start paying off, and we'll get to see some awesome readers this year in your class. Like I said, reach out if you have any questions. I'd be happy to help in any way, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thanks so much for watching.